look at the Sentinel steam wagon that was produced there. To do that, we will be focusing on a number of those that have survived across the decades and what they are doing now here in the second decade of the 21st century, to reflect on the fantastic reminder of our past provided by these wonderful vehicles. Fodens, with their overtype layout, competed with the Sentinels with a smaller share of the market until 1932, when facing the more stringent road operation rules being put in place at the time and struggling to produce a more efficient design, they moved out of steam power and onto diesel and petrol truck development, and therefore left the field of steam wagons to the Sentinels. While Sentinel wagons were produced or modified for a great variety of uses and tasks, in broad terms there were four basic versions or types. The initial design, developed in Glasgow, with varying cab and wheel configurations, became from 1905 the main production version and was known as the Standard, which had an open driving position with the boiler positioned vertically at the front of the cab and the two-cylinder engine under the body providing power to the rear wheels by chain drive. The wheels, much like cart wheels of the time, were initially solid wood with a metal rim, then steel construction, which must have provided for a pretty rough ride. Later, solid rubber to run on was added as an optional extra and eventually became standard in 1914, as on this 6-ton Standard of 1916. In total, some 3,746 standard wagons were built, and therefore these were identified as such, e.g. DG4s, DG6s and DG8s. And in 1933-34, the final version began quantity production. This was the S-Type series. The basic configuration remained the same in that the engine was under the body behind the cab, but now it had 4 cylinders. The S-Type was an attempt to meet the increasingly demanding laws and rules being laid down for the use of steam-powered vehicles on the road and to compete with the petrol and diesel lorries and trucks of the time. The series benefited from the experience gained with the previous generation of steam wagons, as they themselves had been progressively developed. But their prime refinements were a much clearer driving position and view, as the boiler was now positioned at the rear of the cab. As we have seen, Standards were manufactured in Glasgow and Shrewsbury, and there are something like 25 still in existence around the world, so catching up with a Standard is a bit more of a challenge than for the other types. But in Shrewsbury for the Onslow Park Steam Rally and the 2015 Celebration Road Run was this magnificently maintained 4-wheel 6-ton Standard, which left the works in 1916 as number 1488. It is owned, looked after and run by the Ward family, who also run, alongside it, another wonderfully restored and maintained steam wagon, a very early Yorkshire. Both are now to be seen in the magnificently finished livery of the Denbigh Steam Cartage Company. Later in the DVD, we will see this Standard tackling the Celebration Road Run, along with an impressive number of other Sentinels. But at the midway point of that run, right at the top of the Horseshoe Pass, another wheel got
My job to make sure this thing runs, does what it's supposed to do, takes the captain and the base round and does a few VIP trips. It represents the Navy around about the country, this being one of them. She was built in 1930, worked on the docks at Ipswich, that's about the only nautical connection she's got. Went into Kent and done some gravel work, and in 1960 someone had a good idea and got this from a scrapyard in Kent and took it back to Salton on the road with no experience whatsoever. And then 10 years later we bought her for £1,250 and she's been with us ever since. As I said before, she was built in 1930, so she's one of the very late supers. They were building the DG model at the time, the DG being the model that superseded the Super. She took over from the standard model, which ceased production in the early 20s sometime, and then, as I say, this was one of the last Supers we built, around about January 1930 from what we know.
And we were now on the move as well, stopping at various points to catch the wagons as they made their way along the route, initially following the Royal Navy's Super as it moved down through Shrewsbury. We made a stop at the bridge over the River Severn to see the DG4 of Ian Woollock go over, followed by the Maggie May track.